Endurance Junkie Podcast, episode 65. Hey Junkie, thanks for joining me on a new episode of the Endurance Junkie Podcast, the show where I will be interviewing some of the fastest, smartest and most inspiring people active in the endurance world today. Jeff Browning is an ultra running legend. In 2000, he switched from riding his mountain bike to running trails, and he hasn't stopped hammering out the miles ever since. In the process, he's collected an impressive list of wins at ultra distance races, most recently the Bear 100, only a couple of weeks after racing UTMB. Jeff, thanks for joining me today. Now to get things going, can you tell us a bit about yourself, your sporting background growing up, and how you ended up in ultra running?
Hey, Peter, good to be on the show. I kind of started, I've been running my whole life a little bit here and there, but not really competitively. I ran track in high school, but mainly played football. Got into mountain biking in college and in my 20s and was a rock climber and kind of backpacking and mountain biking, skiing, snowboarding, and then kind of did everything outside. And then in 2000, kind of decided to run Western States 100, but I realized you couldn't get in and without a qualifier and getting in the lottery. So it was a little bit of a waiting game. So in the meantime, I ran a half marathon, a marathon, and then ran a 50K in 2001, and then two 50Ks and a 50 miler in 2001 to get my qualifier and enter the lottery in November of 01 for Western States 100. So that's kind of my start into ultra running. It was quick, or not quick, but it just kind of like, I kind of had to learn the ropes. You know, I wanted to do 100 before I even did a 50K. So I kind of learned as I went. And by the time I showed up at the start line in 2002 at Western States, I kind of had some decent experience. Not decent experience, but I probably had 6 ultras under my belt before I ran that race, which set me up for success. You know, all that trial and error of the shorter races. And I still made a lot of mistakes, but, you know, did okay and kind of got hooked on the ultra running community in that whole process. And that's kind of how I found my way into ultras.
So where did that initial idea come from to run Western States as your first ultra marathon?
I had a buddy, Rod Bean, who owns the Patagonia store in Bend, Oregon. I just moved to Bend. He was kind of my first bud in town, and we were hanging out, and he had run a few marathons and had just run a 50K trail race in the Pacific Northwest called McDonald Forest 50K over in Corvallis and McDonald Forest. And the Mac 50K, he kind of had, you know, he was kind of raving about these trail races, and he's like, you should try one. And there's this thing called hundreds. And I was like, what, 100 miles, you know? So I thought it was crazy, but I also my interest was piqued, and I totally wanted to know more and kind of dug into it. And he and I decided to train and qualify for Western States and run 100. So we were kind of just hanging out and running together, and he kind of got me into ultra running and introduced me to it. He had just been introduced himself, and you know, I kind of liked the simplicity of running in the mountains, really light and fast. I'd been a backpacker and a climber, and and a mountain biker, and all those include a decent amount of gear to do those things. And so I like the idea of not being held down by a bunch of gear and just grabbing a couple bottles or a hydration vest and few gels and take off into the woods and be out for hours. I thought that was cool that you could, it kind of meshed single track mountain biking and running was kind of like a mix between that and backpacking, you know, so I kind of really spoke to me, and I kind of got hooked on it that way.
Okay, so you definitely were pretty active growing up, you know, doing all the sports that you mentioned there, but still most of them all pretty different from running. was it the mountain biking that really developed your engine, so to speak? Because you started running and you immediately running pretty fast.
Well, my original, I grew up in the Midwest, Missouri, in the 80s, going to high school and played traditional sports. So I played baseball, basketball, track, and football. So I was always running. I was always running, and we were always playing. I lived on 700-acre farm, so we were always playing in the creeks and running to meet neighbor kids. Because everyone lived a mile apart, so it was a half-mile jog just to go play at the creek. And I pretty much ran everywhere. So I was always running, but the mountain biking really kind of officially started in developing my endurance engine in my 20s. I really got into that in college and rode a lot. I worked at a bike shop and really got into cycling in my 20s quite a bit. And I still did a little bit of running. I had a dog, and I would run my dog like 20, 30 minutes, like 3 days a week or something, and take her for walks. But other than that, I was pretty much on my bike. I commuted. Back before there were much people bike commuting, I was bike commuting everywhere. And so I rode probably 4 or 5 days a week pretty consistently in my 20s. And so I think that was kind of really what started to build that beginning of an endurance engine. So when I came to ultra running in 2001, I already had a big base. I just had to develop the running specific muscle groups to be healthy. So I fought a few injuries the first 3 or 4 seasons running ultras, just because I had some quad and hamstring muscle imbalances from cycling that I had to kind of work out with strength training. But I did. Eventually, and then over the more consistent you are in training, the more volume you can handle. So every year I could handle maybe 10% more volume and running, and then instead of cross training so much, I did a lot of cross training on the bike in the first 3 or 4 seasons. Still was on the bike a lot, just because anytime I'd have a niggle or something bothering me, I'd get back on the bike, and I did struggle in 03, 04 especially. I really struggled with some patella tendonitis, some IT band syndrome, some plantar fasciitis, all kinds of little things back then that I finally figured out. It took me a few seasons to figure them all out, but eventually figured them out and kind of worked on those imbalances and got myself squared away. But that's kind of, every year I didn't run real fast the first couple of years. I was just trying to finish them. I came to it more of like a, relaxed, just go jog and run a 50K. And then by 04, 05, I was starting to try to race. After a couple seasons of doing them and just kind of figuring them out, I really started to want to race. Kind of got on that early Patagonia Montreal sponsored team in 03, and then 03, 04, 05. And 05 is when I really started to that's when I won Bighorn. That was the first win, Bighorn 100 in 2005. So that was kind of like the beginning of like, oh, okay, I can do these things, and I might be able to do them kind of fast. And I felt like I got better the longer the race was. So that's when I really started to like focus on training specifically for these races and kind of peaking and tapering and kind of get more official about it.
You used figuring it out a couple of times there. Did you figure it out all by yourself, or were you coached at the time?
There wasn't really much endurance coaching going on back then, so it was pretty much self coaching. But I've always been even though I was a graphic designer and graphic design major, communications major, I was like really, I was almost a nutrition major. I'd always been interested in coaching, and so I was, I'm a student of the sport for sure. So I'm an avid reader. So I got hold of like Arthur Lydiard's stuff back. 2 things I got hold of. I got hold of Chi Running, and I got hold of Arthur Lydiard's training stuff. All his older books that he wrote on endurance training. I really dug into his stuff. He was kind of an early influence on me as far as his literature and his training philosophies. some Jack Daniels stuff too, but Jack Daniels definitely comes from an Arthur Lydiard influence as well. So I really got into Arthur Lydiard and really followed his stuff. And I probably had 2 or 3 books by him, and I read those cover to cover a couple times. And so that's kind of where my original training philosophy came from, was Arthur Lydiard's kind of endurance training, of like marathon training of big long runs, and then doing strategic buildup in kind of periodization manner of, a base phase, a hill training phase, then speed work to peak you for an event. So I really kind of took that and like morphed it for ultra running, because we run hills so much. So your emphasis is a little more on hills in ultra running training than it is on speed work. Still do speed work, but you want some hills in there too. And so there's some very strategic hill work and mountain type hill work that you mix in ultra running. And that's probably my biggest influence, though, is Arthur Lydiard from a coaching perspective.
So there's definitely a difference there between, training for a marathon or a 50K and then training for a 100K or a 100 miler.
Yeah, there's definitely different training and different emphasis. It depends on the elevation profile. And, that's the beauty of trail running, is you could have, 5 different 100Ks, and you would train for them all a little differently based on their elevation profile and difficulty of terrain. So, I definitely believe in specificity of training, picking like terrain to try to train on if you have it near your home to get ready for that upcoming event. But there's other things we can do. I have several athletes who live in very flat locations, like Chicago area or Florida, for instance. 2 of my athletes we definitely do strategic treadmill work to get them ready for mountain ultras, because they don't have big hills. They do some weight vest hill or a stair climbing, once a week, and then a strategic treadmill session once a week. And then I, definitely concentrating a little more on speed in those flatlanders, just because that helps them with climbing. But those are some, there's all kinds of different ways you can kind of get yourself ready for mountain ultras.
Yeah, I guess it definitely helps to have a creative coach at that point to help you with those aspects. I mean, yeah, I live here in Belgium. It's flat as a pancake as well, so it's hard for people living in those type of areas to, let's say, even get ready for UTMB or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, UTMB is a good example. Like, it's huge, and there's a lot of climbing, 34,000 feet of climbing, and almost 10,000 meters or whatever, around 10,000 meters. Like, it's it definitely, you have to concentrate on hills because that's what you're going to face. But there's definitely ways to do it. It's just not quite as sexy training on a treadmill versus going out in the woods and climbing up a mountain.
No, you don't really see that many treadmill photos on Instagram.
Not that many. I mean, winter time's a great time for the treadmill. I spend a little time on the treadmill in the winter, but as soon as I can, I pretty much stay outside as much as I possibly can, though.
Yeah, good stuff. Now, I heard a quote from Ann Trayson, who once said, like, 100 miles is like living a whole year in one day. And you've run your fair share of 100 milers. Can you sort of relate to that? And what do you love about that particular distance?
Oh man, there's so many things I love about that distance. But I think, yes, I agree with that quote. You live all the emotions of a lifetime in one day. But also, I think the cool thing about hundreds, one, it's the number 100. It's just so big. I think that's what's cool and alluring about it. But also, I think you can't cheat it. You can kind of even cheat a 50K off the couch with not a ton of training. You're going to hurt like crazy, and then you're going to be really sore afterwards. But you can get to the finish line, right? But a 100-miler, probably not if you go off the couch, or you get very limited training. So I like it because you can't really cheat it. You have to put in the work. You have to get up. You have to put in a decent amount of build up and training to get there to the start line and actually make it to the finish line. And you have to learn other things too. It's like this puzzle, and every person's different because everybody's metabolic system is a little different. it matters how much hydration and nutrition and electrolyte balance and all those things play into it, and logistics and how well the course. You got to follow course markers and not get lost. And there's all these like logistical challenges that go along with a 100-mile distance and nighttime running that I think it is very alluring for me. And also it's just the giant challenge of it. I just love it. I love like running all day in the mountains during an event like that, going light and fast. And there's something, for me, it's just something very engaging, and like it's unlike any other distance for sure. I've done 2900s now, and I don't know. I love doing them.
Do you have any specific pre-race rituals?
Yeah. I try to eat my own food. I don't like to eat out too much the week before the race. Sometimes the logistics when you're traveling is a little tricky, but pre-race rituals, the biggest things, I always do a cheat sheet on my wrist. If you ever see photos, I'm always going to have a little yellow wristband that I got at Hard Rock that says John DeWalt Tough, which was, kind of a memorial to John DeWalt, who finished, I don't know how many times he finished Hard Rock, but a lot. His last finishes were in his 70s. I use that, and I put a little cheat sheet on my wrist. So that's a ritual, is always to have the aid station, the distance, and my time split, my A goal time split to that aid station on a wristband. So I always have that. Another ritual, I always eat eggs and avocado. What else?
As breakfast, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I always eat eggs and avocado for breakfast on race day. Bulletproof coffee. Those are all rituals. At least the last 2 years of rituals. Before that, it was 2 raw eggs in raw milk. And drink it down Rocky style, just gulp, gulp, and a banana. But I don't do the banana anymore. But those are some. I don't really have any major, pre-race rituals. I always do a little bit of warm up. Just easy jogging with some stretching. Those are my main ones. Anymore, I'm just so. I don't get nervous or anything like that. I'm just so used to doing them that I just kind of show up and. You can't get nervous at the start of 100 because you got so long to the finish that you just kind of like show up and start running.
Yeah. What do you do when you don't hit those A goals that you have on your yellow wristband?
I always go to B, C, and D. No.
Okay, how many do you have there?
Well, my goals are always whatever that A time is, and then backup plan is to get under every hour after that. So let's say we're going to try to run 18:55 in 100, right? Well, my next goal would be to get under 19 hours. The next goal would be to get under 20. And then once I hit 24 and I'm not going to get under 24 hours, then it's just finish. Get through on the cutoffs. I've never had anything blow up that bad. Hard Rock in 07, it was probably my roughest go as far as like I had to take a 45-minute nap at Chapman at mile 83, and it was really slow. I went out too hard that year, and I thought I was better than I really was, type of deal. I'd won Bighorn twice in 05, 06, and I showed up in 07 to run Hard Rock and had never been on the course, and it kind of slapped me in the face. And I was humbled, and I had to eat some humble pie and take a nap and got to finish. So, that's probably, my goal always too in hundreds is to finish. I've only DNF'd one time, and that was because of an injury at UTMB in 2015. I rolled an ankle at mile 11 and dropped at Courmayeur at mile 47. So, I limped 50K on it and couldn't go any farther and had to drop out. That's been my only DNF in 17, almost 18 years of ultra running.
Yeah. So, I mean, you don't have a problem that because you're at that level that you race for the win or for the podium. But, if something goes wrong, you don't have a problem to actually switching to those B, C plans and just go, okay, it's not my day today and I'm just going to finish.
Yeah. And I have wife and 3 kids, so I take time away from them to train my rear off. And if I'm doing that, I kind of feel like I owe it to them to finish, even if it's not my A goal. So if I'm going to put the time in and pay money to go to a race and go somewhere and travel and all those things and take time away from them, I feel like it's a lesson for them. Like, hey, not everything goes according to plan always, and you have to stick it out. If you make a commitment, you stick it out and you do the hard work, and it may not go ideally, but you finish. And that's kind of how I feel like it's kind of a life lesson. You keep moving forward, unless it's an injury or life threatening, then that's a different story. But if it's just discomfort, then you should suck it up.
Yeah, that's a great mindset. You talked about your eggs and avocado and bulletproof coffee and stuff like that. So I suppose you're low carb, high fat. Is that correct?
Yeah, I am. I have been for 2 years, almost 2 years now. The last 2 seasons I've raced on strictly being a high fat, low carb athlete. And that was a big shift I did in December 1st in 2015, right before Hurt 100 in 2016. About 7 weeks out from that race, I switched. I was having some major health issues in 2015 with some candida overgrowth and candida issues and yeast issues, and was having some skin rashes and some GI issues. And I finally, after a bunch of research, about 30 hours worth of research, I knew there was a nutritional fix. I wasn't willing to go on any kind of medication. So I basically found a paleo primal forum and kind of went down that nutritional road and cut out kind of grains and sugar and legumes. And I still do strategic, simple sugars on race day and long runs, but that's it. I don't do it in my regular life. I will eat some dark chocolate, is about the extent of and some wine and maybe some clear liquor or little bourbon or something every once in a while if I'm having a drink. But most of the time it's going to be most of the time I stay away from that stuff, except maybe a little on race day and long runs.
How does it affect your performance? Do you feel a difference?
I do. I feel a huge difference. I feel like I have a new level of clean. Also, recovery's way faster on this diet than any other thing else I've tried. And I've been a vegetarian. I've been a whole foods diet, like organic whole foods for, I was a vegetarian for 7 years and in my 20s, and then organic. When I first got into ultra running, I was a vegetarian, and then switched to, my wife had some major health issues on it, and I wasn't doing so hot either. I was losing a lot of muscle mass. I came from kind of a strength, traditional sports and football and strength training background, and so I lifted a lot of weights when I was younger, and so I had a pretty solid muscle build on my frame, and I lost a ton of muscle mass as a vegetarian. So I switched to we both switched to a whole foods diet, which was kind of organic, soaking legumes and sprouted grains and that kind of stuff, and really clean meats, and went back to eating meat, but just clean meats. So supporting, a sustainable, not supporting factory farming of animals, but more like grass-fed, grass-finished, wild grazed, and wild mimicked meat raising. So you have a happy animal, right? It's a sustainable model. You're not supporting monoculture, which as a vegetarian, that's unfortunately, if you look at how your food is produced, that's a tricky, you might be thinking you're doing it for the planet, but you're actually harming the planet by eating a ton of vegetables like that, because most vegetables are grown on a mass scale, on a monoculture scale, which means there's two things that get lost when you support monoculture, and that's prairies, natural wild prairies, and wetlands. Those are the first two things to go. We've lost 80% of our natural grasslands in the world to monoculture, growing plants. So most people don't know where their food comes from. And growing up on a farm and a commercial farming model, I really understand that model, quite well, seeing it firsthand, both sides, clean and dirty. And so I try to support with my dollars. I try to support local ranches and local producers and give them retail prices and not the big conglomerates, if at all possible. So. And this is a whole soapbox we could get on. I could get on, and I could go down this long discussion about sustainable eating. But just understanding where your food comes from and how your food is fed, right? That for you vegetarians out there, because I used to be one, this is a good one. This is a quick one. If you're gonna eat vegetables, right? I eat vegetables, but I mean, if you're saying it's good for the planet, something has to feed your food, and there are two choices. It is either animals or it's fossil fuels. Because if your food needs food, it needs to be fertilized, and that means fossil fuels, chemical fertilizers, or animals, and they need blood, bone, and manure, not just manure. So you have to use the whole animal to fertilize, to organic fertilize. So if you're trying to grow your own garden, what you realize is you have to improve your soil every year, or you don't get a yield. You won't get food off that soil. So your food has to have food, and if you're going to feed your food, it's either fossil fuels or animals. So you have to choose. And if we're going to choose, obviously most of us aren't going to support fossil fuels and chemical fertilizers. So we have to use animals, and if we're going to use animals, we have to do it in a very respectful, sustainable manner, and that means wild mimicked. That means, obviously we can't just let a bunch of animals roam free everywhere because we have private property everywhere, but we do need to be building soil. And so anybody that's interested, I would definitely recommend The Vegetarian Myth as a read. It's on Audible. And then also Omnivore's Dilemma. Both of those books are really good to give you a perspective on what sustainable agriculture is. Most people are pretty disconnected from their food supply these days. Last couple of generations have moved from an agricultural society to an urban society, and we don't really even know how our food's produced. So anyway, that's my soapbox. We can move on to a different question. But,
you definitely
obviously I'm passionate about this, so and very opinionated about it. But it's something I really have done a lot of studying on, and I have been a vegetarian, and there's reasons why I went back to eating meat. Not only from a health perspective, but also from a sustainability perspective and what's good for the planet's perspective. Natural prairies are a filtration system, right? And cows are not supposed to eat grain. So, we're supposed to eat grass. They're herbivores. So just understanding all those things is very important. And, I'm not trying to tell anybody what to do, but I do recommend and encourage people to do deeper research.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel your passion there. Thanks for your point of view. What I was going to ask? Yeah, you tweeted that you're stabled for the rest of the year. I mean, yeah, go Bronco Billy, Bronco. What are your plans for 2018? Do you have a bucket list of races, or do you have your race plan figured out?
Yeah, Western States 100 is definitely on the list because I was in the top 10 and I'm back in that race, so I can bypass the lottery. So I'll be back at Western States. I'm looking at my spring schedule right now. I just relocated to Logan, Utah, so from Bend, Oregon. So I'm now in a different location, different state. I got new local races to do in the spring, so I'll probably be going down to Moab for a race, in the spring. Probably Moab, like Red Hot or something like that. There's a couple other races I'm looking at, here locally to kind of build up some training in the spring. And then Western States, I'm putting in for Hard Rock again. So hopefully I get in through the lottery. I have 3 finishes there, so hopefully I can get in again. I'll go after, do the double again. It's 4 weeks apart this year. They had to move Hard Rock a week later. So instead of 3 weeks, I have 4 weeks. So that's great. And then I'll probably do something in the fall, another 100. I may do another 100 in the spring before Western States, maybe like a March, April type timeline. I'm not sure yet. I'm still I just got moved like 3 weeks ago, so I'm still like in that post 100, trying to get the house unpacked, organized mode. So I haven't really looked at my schedule for next year super heavily. I just have some ideas.
Yeah, but you're definitely going strong, that's for sure.
Yes.
What do you see as your biggest achievement in your career so far, and what's your biggest regret or your biggest disappointment?
Oh, well, biggest regret would be not changing this diet sooner, because it's been a great. I felt like it's been a performance enhancer for me, especially as a 46-year-old athlete. Recovery is really good on it. So that would be one regret, I guess. Or if I could do differently, I would change my diet earlier to this. I just, we're all on a path, right? And this evolution of life, and when you're walking down paths, you only have certain information. And sometimes I wish I would have got this information earlier.
Do you think this type of diet is what made it possible for you to do these doubles like Western States and Hard Rock, and then this year UTMB, and then the Bear 100, which you won?
To come back healthy, I think it's definitely a big contributing factor. The other would be just my consistency of training over the years. I mean, everyone who looks at me running so many hundreds a year, you have to remember there's 17 years of ultra running consistently in there. So the first 02 through 06, I ran 100 a year. And then starting in 07, I ran 200s a year, very spread out. And then I did that through 07, 08, 09, 10, 11, 12, 13. So whatever that is, what is that? 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 7 years of twice a year. And then in 2014, I did 4. And then I started doing 3 or 4 a year from that point forward. So there's an evolution there that people don't always see. They just see, wow, Jeff can run so many hundreds back to back. But there also is a lot of adaptation in there and a lot of very consistent year-round training for 17 years. I haven't had a lot of setbacks since like 04. My last major injury where I had to take a long period of time off was 04. I started doing strength training again in 04, 05 in the off season, in 05, 06. I really came back to strength training after about 3 or 4 year hiatus from it. And I really started embracing that. And I really worked on, strength. That's about the time I changed my diet to a whole foods diet, from a vegetarian. So there was a whole bunch of contributing factors to help me be healthier. And then over time, I got even, more adapted to running long distances, and then I could handle more volume and come back faster. So there is a muscle adaptation that goes there, right? Of just consistency in endurance training, but also the diet. Definitely, I saw a huge shift. And when I made that shift, I lost weight, which your strength to weight ratio goes up. My inflammatory response went way down, so my recovery was faster on this diet. I really noticed that. I mean, that was probably the biggest notice. Besides the weight loss, I lost 8 pounds. I also saw a major shift in inflammatory response.
Okay, cool. Biggest achievement?
Biggest achievement. I mean, the double was pretty sweet. I mean, I loved racing that, and that just was right up my alley of 2 back-to-back hundreds. That was a great one. I'm assuming we're talking ultra running here, not life. As far as big achievement, I think
your choice.
I think just running consistently too, and being healthy for so long has been a huge one for me. Just being able to continually race year after year into my 40s. I never thought I'd still be racing this hard at 46. And the competition has not gotten any easier. It's only gotten harder in the last 3 or 4 years. But still being able to be up there up front, it's pretty fun for me, being a veteran, and I really enjoy it. So I'd say that's one. Just being consistent and racing so much. I've done 2,900s. That's a pretty big achievement in itself. 2018 will be number 30. So sometime in this year, next year will be number 30 in hundreds. So.
All right. Well, awesome. Well, good luck with that. In next year, we'll definitely keep an eye on that. How can people get in touch with you if they want to, Jeff?
Yeah, you go to my website, gobroncobilly.com. That's where my coaching is on, blog, social medias, Go Bronco Billy. So Twitter and Instagram are both Go Bronco Billy. Facebook is facebook.com/Go Bronco Billy. So that's where people can get a hold of me if anybody's interested in coaching. It is kind of off season right now, so I am taking a couple athletes. So I do have a couple open slots. I just had a couple come on today, and I had a couple go take a break, and so I have a couple of slots that I would be happy to fill. And that's it.
All right. Feel free to give some love to your sponsors or partners.
Yeah, I have to give a big shout out to Patagonia and Ultra Footwear and Ultra Spire Packs, Goo, Black Diamond, Trail Butter, Squirrel Nut Butter, Vespa, all those companies, Rudy Project. They've all been really supportive of me over the years. We've had a great relationships, and I love those companies and continue to support them. And that's kind of how I've always developed my relationships with sponsors. Has always been a product that I already use or believe in, and then approach them, or someone's approached me and I was already using their products. So I really, really do like those companies, and that's why I'm aligned with them.
All right, cool. I'll definitely try to put most of them on the show notes page. Anything else you want to plug?
I don't think so. I mean, everybody just get out there and do your thing and enjoy life, and try not to sweat it too much, and have fun. Take care of your family.
All right, cool. We finished the interview. You step outside of the house. You find a lottery ticket that ends up winning $10 million. What do you do?
What do I do with $10 million? Well, I'd pretty much not change a lot. I put a lot in the bank. I'd help my family out, my extended family out. I'd put enough aside for my kids, and my wife, and I'd probably still endurance coach, I have to say. Keep running. I travel maybe a little more.
All right.
But
excellent.
I can change a lot. My life's pretty good. I'm pretty happy.
All right. Let's keep it like that. Thanks for your time, Jeff.
Thank you.
Junkie, thanks for listening to this episode with Bronco Billy. You could really feel his passion there when he was sharing his opinion about how and where we should get our food from. And he's right, yeah, we definitely need to put some serious thought into the matter. There's almost 8 billion people living on this planet, and we just need to stop putting all this junk food into our bodies. It's not just a debate for us athletes to improve performance, it's a truly global issue that affects us all. So I'm definitely going to check out these 2 books you mentioned there, The Vegetarian Myth and Omnivore's Dilemma. Links will be on the show notes page on the website, junkiepodcast.com, if you're interested as well. Now, if you like what you've just heard and don't want to miss any future episodes, head over to iTunes or Stitcher and subscribe to the show. Now, while you're at it, and if you have some spare time, leave me a rating and a review as well. That would be awesome, and will help grow the show. Alright, thanks again for listening, and I'll hope you'll join me next time. Cheers.